Marcus Cole stepped out of the Vertex Technologies building for the last time on a crisp October morning that smelled of rain and fallen leaves. Fired. No warning, no explanation. 6 years of dedication, countless late nights debugging code until 3 in the morning, weekends sacrificed at the altar of corporate loyalty while his daughter waited at home with the babysitter, birthdays missed, soccer games skipped, all of it erased in a single 15-minute meeting with a woman he had never seen before in his life. He clutched his cardboard box of belongings, the pathetic sum of half a decade, reduced to a collection of picture frames and coffee mugs and a wilting desk plant that Emily had given him their first anniversary when she said every office needed something alive to make it feel less like a prison, and paused at the edge of the parking lot where the morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete like fingers reaching toward him. He turned back for one final look at the glass tower that had been his second home for 6 long years. It was a habit. This looking back, Marcus had always been the kind of man who needed closure, who could not simply walk away from something without acknowledging what he was leaving behind, without giving the past its due respect before moving into an uncertain future. He had done it when they sold their first apartment in Beaverton to move into the house in northeast Portland, where Lily would grow up. He had done it standing at the edge of Emily's grave after everyone else had left, the rain mixing with his tears until he could not tell which was which. He did it now, standing in the parking lot of the company that had just discarded him like yesterday's newspaper, without so much as a decent explanation for why his services were no longer required. And then his heart stopped beating in his chest. 15 floors up, behind the sun-streaked glass of the executive suite that sparkled like diamonds scattered across a midnight sky, stood a woman with golden hair cascading past her shoulders like liquid honey pouring from a jar. She was looking down at him, her face partially obscured by the glare of morning light reflecting off the glass in fractured patterns, but unmistakable nonetheless to a man who had memorized every line and curve of that face over 7 years of marriage. That face he knew better than his own reflection. Those lips he had kissed 1,000 times in moments of joy and sorrow and everyday affection. That delicate curve of her jaw that he had traced with his fingertips on lazy Sunday mornings when the world seemed to exist only for the two of them, and Lily was still sleeping peacefully in her nursery down the hall. Emily, his wife, the woman he had buried 5 years ago in Riverview Cemetery on a rainy October afternoon, while their 3-year-old daughter asked why Mommy would not wake up, and Marcus had no answers that could possibly make sense to a child whose entire world had just collapsed. Marcus stood frozen in the middle of the parking lot, his feet rooted to the asphalt as if gravity itself had intensified around him to the point of complete paralysis. The cardboard box slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, tumbling to the ground and scattering its contents across the sun-warmed pavement in a mess he could not bring himself to care about. Pens rolled under nearby cars, where they would probably remain forever. A framed photograph of Lily at her 5th birthday party, frosting smeared across her beaming face, cracked against the concrete with a sound like breaking bones. The desk plant Emily had given him spilled soil across the white lines of the parking space in a dark streak that looked almost like dried blood, but Marcus noticed none of it. His eyes remained locked on the 15th floor, on the woman who stood like a ghost behind the glass, watching him with an expression he could not read from this distance, but felt nonetheless like a hand reaching across the void between life and death to touch his face one more time. She was still there when he blinked hard enough to hurt, proving this was not a hallucination born of stress and sudden unemployment, and the constant, low-grade grief he had carried for 5 years like a stone in his chest. Blonde hair catching the morning light like spun gold, the exact shade Emily had always kept hers, the color of autumn wheat fields at sunset that she used to point out during their drives through the Willamette Valley wine country. A face so achingly familiar that Marcus could trace every line of it from memory, even at this distance of 15 stories and 5 years of grief that had never fully healed, no matter how many therapy sessions he attended or support groups. he joined. He had kissed those lips on their wedding day at Cathedral Park beneath the Gothic arches, while their friends cheered and his mother cried, and Emily whispered that she would love him until the stars burned out of the sky. He had watched those eyes flutter closed in sleep beside him for 7 years of marriage, had memorized the exact rhythm of her breathing in the dark when he could not sleep and would lie awake just listening to her exist. He had held that face in his trembling hands as monitors flatlined and nurses rushed in with futile urgency, while their whole world collapsed into the steady tone of a heart that would never beat again. Emily had died in his arms 5 years ago at Providence Portland Medical Center in a room that smelled of antiseptic and despair. He had been there when her breathing slowed to nothing, when the warmth left her skin degree by degree like a sunset fading into night, when the woman he loved, more than anything in this world, slipped away after a car accident that had shattered their future in a single moment of twisted metal and broken glass, and a drunk driver who would serve only 18 months for vehicular manslaughter. Thomas Henley had run a red light on a Tuesday afternoon at the intersection of Burnside and 23rd, his blood alcohol level twice the legal limit at 2 in the afternoon because his marriage was falling apart, and he had decided that his 4th beer of the lunch hour was more important than other people's lives, and just like that, Marcus had become a widower at 33 years old with a 3-year-old daughter who would grow up without her mother because of a stranger's selfish choices. He had identified her body at the hospital, his hands shaking so violently that the attending nurse had to steady him as he lifted the white sheet to see what remained of the woman he had promised to love until death did them part, never imagining death would come so soon, and so violently, and so completely without warning. He had planned her funeral while Lily asked why Mommy was sleeping so long, why Mommy would not wake up, no matter how many times Lily kissed her cheek the way Mommy always kissed her goodnight, why Daddy kept crying and could not stop, even when Lily hugged him and said it was okay. He had scattered half her ashes into the Pacific Ocean at Cannon Beach on a gray November morning, their favorite weekend getaway spot, where they had walked hand in hand so many times, watching the waves crash against Haystack Rock, keeping the other half in a blue ceramic urn that still sat on his bedroom dresser because he could not bear to let all of her go. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And yet there she stood, 15 stories above him, watching him with an expression he could not read from this distance, but that seemed to contain something he had never seen on Emily's face, something cold and distant and almost calculating. A cloud passed over the sun, and the glare on the window shifted like a curtain being drawn back on a stage. For one crystalline moment, Marcus saw her clearly without the interference of reflected light, the shape of her nose, slightly upturned at the tip just like Emily's, the way her hair fell across her forehead in that particular wave that Emily had always complained about but that Marcus had secretly loved because it made her look like a woman in a painting, something timeless and beautiful. The posture was somehow different, straighter and more rigid than the Emily he remembered, more like a soldier at attention than the relaxed, casual way his wife had always carried herself through the world. But the face was exactly the same. God help him. The face was exactly the same, down to the tiny mole near her left ear, that Marcus had kissed 1,000 times in the darkness of their bedroom. The woman stepped back from the window, disappearing into the shadows of the building like a ghost dissolving into morning mist, and something snapped inside Marcus's chest like a rubber band stretched too far. His legs were moving before his brain could process what he was doing, carrying him back toward the entrance he had just exited in disgrace, and he did not care that he looked like a madman. He did not care that people were staring, or that security would probably tackle him before he reached the elevator. He did not care about anything except reaching the 15th floor and seeing that face up close. Former colleagues stared as he burst through the glass doors, like a man fleeing a burning building in reverse. Sarah, from accounting, who had brought him coffee every morning for 3 years, and always remembered that he took it black with no sugar. Jim, from the development team, his closest work friend, who had helped him through the darkest days after Emily's death and had never once complained about picking up extra work when Marcus needed time off to grieve. The man who had just been escorted out of the building by security was running back in like someone possessed by demons or desperate love, and nobody knew what to do about it. Marcus ignored their whispers and their stares and their concerned questions. He ignored the security guard, calling his name from across the lobby in a voice that mixed confusion with authority. He ignored everything except the desperate need to reach the 15th floor and see that face up close enough to confirm what his eyes were telling him, or to prove that grief had finally driven him insane after 5 years of keeping it barely contained. He jabbed the elevator button repeatedly, watching the numbers descend with agonizing slowness that seemed designed to torment him. 14, 13, 12. Each floor took an eternity. When the doors finally opened with a cheerful ding that seemed obscene under the circumstances, Marcus stepped inside and reached for the panel, his badge already in his hand. But when he swiped it, the reader beeped angrily, flashing red like an accusation. Access denied. They had already deactivated his credentials, probably while he was still sitting in that cold conference room on the 10th floor, listening to a stranger with his wife's face explain that his position had been eliminated due to corporate restructuring that required difficult decisions. Marcus slammed his palm against the elevator wall in frustration, hard enough to leave a red mark on his skin and send a jolt of pain up his arm, then rushed back out to the security desk where Tony Martinez was watching him with an expression that mixed sympathy with professional obligation. "Please, Tony, I need to go up there, just 5 minutes. I will be in and out before anyone notices, please." The security guard shook his head with genuine regret visible in his eyes. His expression said he wished he could help, but his words said otherwise. "I am sorry, Mr. Cole. You have been terminated. I cannot let you access the building anymore. If I let you up there and something happens, I lose my job too. I have got 2 kids in college, you understand." Marcus wanted to explain. He wanted to grab Tony by the shoulders and tell him that the woman upstairs was his dead wife, that something impossible was happening, that the universe had either given him a miracle or was playing the cruelest joke imaginable on a man who had already lost everything once and had just lost his career besides. But the words died in his throat because he knew how they would be received. A grieving widower who thinks he saw his dead wife in a corporate office building was the kind of thing that got people escorted not just out of buildings, but into psychiatric evaluations where doctors used words like dissociative episode and trauma response. He stumbled back outside into the harsh morning light, his chest heaving with ragged breaths that felt like they were being dragged through broken glass, and craned his neck to look up at the 15th floor. 3rd window from the left. That was where she had been standing. He was certain of it, would have bet his life on it, would have sworn it on his daughter's head. But now, there was nothing. Just glass, reflecting clouds, and the indifferent Portland sky, and the creeping doubt that maybe he had imagined the whole thing, that maybe his grief had finally cracked open after 5 years of keeping it contained and had showed him what he most wanted to see. But he had not imagined it. Marcus knew his wife's face better than he knew his own reflection. He had spent 7 years memorizing every line, every curve, every tiny imperfection that made her perfect. He had seen Emily up there, as real and solid as the pavement beneath his feet. The question was not whether he had seen her. The question was how it was possible when he had watched her die and buried her ashes and visited her grave every Sunday for 5 years. His hands trembling so badly he could barely work his phone, Marcus called Grace Tanaka, the HR director who had become something like a friend over the years of working together. Grace had been the one to warn him 2 hours before his termination that something bad was coming. She had pulled him aside in the break room, her face tight with the kind of guilt that came from knowing something she was not supposed to share. She had not been able to stop it, had not had the power to overrule a decision that came from the executive suite, but she had cared enough to try, and Marcus would always be grateful for that small kindness. Grace picked up on the 2nd ring. "Marcus? Are you okay? I heard what happened." Grace, I need you to tell me something. His voice sounded foreign to his own ears, strained and desperate, and nothing like the calm, capable senior engineer he had been for 6 years. The woman on the 15th floor, blonde hair, executive suite, who is she? There was a pause on the other end, the kind of pause that meant Grace was choosing her words carefully while trying to figure out why he was asking such a strange question at such a strange time. Marcus, are you okay? You sound really upset. More upset than just the termination, I mean. Please, just tell me who she is. Another pause, longer this time, filled with the muffled sounds of office activity in the background. The only blonde woman on that floor is Catherine Reed. She is the new COO. Started about 6 months ago, came from some big tech company in San Francisco. Impressive resume. Why do you ask? Catherine Reed. The name meant absolutely nothing to him. He had never heard it before, had no connection to anyone by that name, had never seen a Catherine Reed on any company-wide email or quarterly report. But that face meant everything. Can you get me a meeting with her? Please, Grace. I know this sounds crazy. I know I just got fired and I have no right to ask you for anything. But I need to see her face up close. Just once. Just for 5 minutes. That is all I am asking. Grace's silence stretched for several agonizing seconds, long enough for Marcus to hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears like a drum. Marcus, she is the one who signed off on your termination. She personally approved your layoff package. The decision came directly from her desk. Why would you want to meet the woman who just fired you? Are you planning something? Because if you are, I need to know right now. No, nothing like that. I just need to understand something. Understand what? He could not answer that question. Not honestly. Not without sounding like a man who had completely lost his grip on reality. So he mumbled something about closure, about wanting to know why he had been let go after 6 years of perfect performance reviews and 3 promotions and not a single negative mark on his record, and hung up before Grace could ask more questions he was not equipped to handle. The drive home was a blur of traffic lights and unanswered questions. Marcus gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, his mind replaying that image over and over like a film stuck on repeat. Emily on the 15th floor. Emily watching him. Emily standing in an office she had never seen, in a building she had never entered, wearing a tailored charcoal suit she had never owned in a life cut short at 32 years old. Emily with different posture, different energy, different everything except that face, that unmistakable face that had haunted his dreams for 5 years. Except Emily was not alive. She could not be alive. He had watched her die. He had felt the exact moment her pulse stopped beneath his fingertips, that terrible stillness that had followed her last shallow breath, like the silence after a final note of music fades away. He had signed the death certificate and the cremation authorization and the insurance paperwork that had paid off the mortgage, but could not bring back the woman who had made that house a home. Emily Cole was dead. The state of Oregon had a certificate proving it. There was a headstone in Riverview Cemetery with her name carved into granite. But then, who was the woman in the window? When Marcus walked through his front door, Lily was waiting for him on the couch, with her legs tucked under her and her favorite stuffed elephant clutched to her chest, her 8-year-old face lighting up with a smile that quickly faded when she saw his expression. She had always been perceptive. His daughter, more intuitive than any child had a right to be, perhaps because she had learned early that the world could change in an instant and that adults did not always tell the truth about why they were sad. Even at 3 years old, she had known something was wrong when Daddy came home from the hospital alone, had asked where Mommy was with a tremor in her voice that said she already knew the answer would not be good. The babysitter, a college student named Megan who lived 2 blocks away and had been watching Lily after school since she was 5, gathered her things and left with a concerned backward glance at Marcus. "Is everything okay, Mr. Cole?" she asked quietly, her voice careful in the way of someone who knows they are stepping into something complicated. She hovered by the door, clearly reluctant to leave but also clearly sensing that Marcus needed space. He barely acknowledged her departure. His mind still 15 floors up in a glass tower, chasing a ghost. "Daddy, you look tired." Lily's voice was soft and worried in a way that made Marcus's chest ache with guilt for bringing his troubles home where she could see them. "Did you have bad dreams?" "Sometimes I have bad dreams too, about Mommy, but you always tell me it is okay to miss her." Marcus forced himself to smile, kneeling down to pull his daughter into a hug that he needed more than she did. Her hair smelled like the strawberry shampoo Emily had always used, a scent that had once brought comfort but now sent a jolt of complicated pain through his heart. "Just thinking about work, honey. Nothing for you to worry about. Daddy just had a hard day." Lily wrapped her small arms around his neck, squeezing with all the strength her little body could muster. "It is okay, Daddy. You will find a new job. You are the smartest daddy in the world. Mommy always said so." The mention of Emily, casual and matter-of-fact, the way children talk about the dead once enough time has passed to sand down the sharp edges of grief, hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. "Thanks, sweetheart. What do you say we order pizza for dinner and watch that movie you like about the talking animals?" That night, after Lily had gone to bed with promises of pancakes in the morning and one more chapter of their bedtime book about a girl who could talk to dragons, Marcus sat alone in the darkness of his living room. The television was off. The house was silent, except for the ticking of the antique clock Emily had bought at a flea market in Selwood their first year of marriage. A clock that still kept perfect time despite its age, that still marked the passing of hours in a house that often felt frozen in the moment of her leaving. He sat in the shadows for a long time, staring at nothing, his mind churning through possibilities that ranged from unlikely to impossible. A twin sister Emily never knew about, a look-alike, a doppelganger, a statistical anomaly of genetics that had produced two identical faces from two unrelated bloodlines. A ghost visible only to him. A hallucination, a cruel trick of light and grief and desperate longing for something that could never be. Finally, he picked up his phone and began scrolling through his photo gallery, through the hundreds of images he had kept of Emily, even when his therapist had gently suggested that maybe he should consider storing some of them away where he would not see them every day. Emily, laughing at their wedding reception, champagne spilling down her white dress because she had gestured too enthusiastically while telling a joke about the DJ. Emily holding newborn Lily in the hospital room at Providence, exhausted but radiant, looking at their daughter like she was made of starlight and wishes and everything good in the world. Emily blowing out candles on her 30th birthday, the last birthday she would ever celebrate, surrounded by friends who would later stand in black at her funeral and tell Marcus how sorry they were, how unfair it was, how Emily had been too young and too full of life to be taken so suddenly. Then Marcus opened LinkedIn and searched for Catherine Reed. The photograph that appeared made his blood turn to ice in his veins. It was Emily. Every feature, every angle, every detail was identical, down to the slight asymmetry of her smile, the way the right corner lifted just a fraction higher than the left. The woman in the corporate headshot could have been his wife's passport photo, could have been a picture taken from Emily's own LinkedIn profile before Marcus had it taken down after her death. Stanford MBA. Former vice president at a tech company in San Francisco called Meridian Solutions, recently appointed chief operating officer of Vertex Technologies. An impressive career spanning 15 years, documented with dates and achievements and professional recommendations from colleagues who praised her strategic thinking and decisive leadership. But there was no family information, no mention of parents or siblings or a hometown, no biographical details before her undergraduate years at Stanford, as if Catherine Reed had simply appeared in the world at 18, fully formed and ready to conquer the corporate ladder. It was as if someone had created a resume for a person without a past, a paper trail that began at adulthood and offered nothing about where she had come from. Marcus stared at the photo until his eyes burned, switching back and forth between Catherine's profile and the images of Emily stored on his phone. Identical. The resemblance was so perfect it seemed like a cosmic joke, like someone had taken Emily's face and pasted it onto a stranger's life just to torment a widower who had finally started to find his footing again. And yet, something was different. The more Marcus looked, the more he noticed the subtle distinctions that lived beneath the surface. The way Catherine held herself in the photograph, shoulders back, chin slightly elevated, projecting a confidence that bordered on coldness. The set of her mouth pressed into a professional smile that did not reach her eyes. Emily had been warmth and light and beautiful chaos, a woman who laughed too loud at her own jokes and cried at commercials for dog food and hugged strangers who looked like they needed it. This woman looked like a statue carved from ice, beautiful but untouchable, powerful but remote. The coincidence was impossible. The resemblance was too perfect to be random chance, which left only one explanation that made any kind of sense. No matter how improbable it seemed, Emily had been adopted. She had told Marcus that on their third date, her voice soft with old pain as they shared secrets over cheap wine in his tiny studio apartment in Beaverton. She had never known her birth parents, had been given up as an infant through a private adoption agency that had closed its doors years before Emily was old enough to ask questions. The adoption had been closed, the record sealed, and despite years of searching, hiring private investigators, sending letters to government agencies, she had never been able to find any information about where she came from. She used to say she felt incomplete, like a piece of herself was missing somewhere in the world, like there was a phantom limb she could not see but always sensed, aching in the distance. Marcus had held her on nights when that feeling overwhelmed her, had promised her that she was whole, that she was enough, that their family was everything she needed. But he had never been able to fill that empty space inside her, the one that had existed long before they met. What if that missing piece was not a metaphor? What if Emily had a twin sister she never knew existed? Marcus grabbed his laptop and began researching twin separations with the desperation of a man grasping at straws in a hurricane. The stories he found were heartbreaking and eerily familiar. Identical twins, adopted by different families through different agencies, living parallel lives on opposite coasts without any knowledge of each other. Sometimes they discovered the truth through DNA ancestry tests decades later, comparing results with strangers who turned out to share their exact genetic code. Sometimes they stumbled across each other by accident, meeting in coffee shops or college classrooms and feeling an inexplicable connection that they could not explain until much later. Sometimes they never found out at all, living and dying without ever knowing that half of themselves existed elsewhere in the world. The adoption agencies of the 1980s had been notoriously careless about keeping siblings together. Twins were separated all the time, especially if they came from troubled circumstances. Mothers who were too young or too poor or too overwhelmed to keep even one child, let alone two. Nobody thought to tell the adoptive parents that there was another baby out there, another half of the equation. Nobody kept records that could be accessed later. Thousands of twins were scattered across the country like seeds in the wind, growing into separate people who would always feel that something fundamental was missing from their lives. He lay awake until dawn crept through the curtains, watching shadows move across the ceiling, unable to shake the image of that golden-haired woman looking down at him from the 15th floor. When morning came, Marcus made a decision. He would find a way to meet Catherine Reed face to face, not to confront her about his termination, not to beg for his job back or demand explanations for corporate decisions, but because if there was even a chance that this woman was connected to Emily, if there was any possibility that his wife had a sister she never knew about, then Catherine deserved to know the truth. She deserved to know that she had a niece named Lily who had Emily's eyes and Emily's smile. She deserved to know that there was a family out there that might have been hers. And Marcus needed to understand why seeing that face again had shattered something inside him he thought was already broken beyond repair. The following Saturday, Marcus took Lily to Pioneer Courthouse Square as they had done every weekend since Emily's death. It was a tradition that had started as a way to get out of the house that felt too empty without Emily in it. a weekly ritual of feeding pigeons and eating ice cream, and pretending that the hole in their family was not as vast as it felt. Emily had loved this plaza with its red brick patterns and its fountain that danced in programmed sequences. She had brought Lily here for the first time when their daughter was only 3 months old, had held her up to see the pigeons and laughed when Lily had reached out with tiny hands to try to catch them. Marcus sat on a weathered wooden bench near the fountain, while Lily chased a red rubber ball across the brick plaza, her laughter bright and clear against the gray Portland afternoon. The sky was overcast, threatening rain that never quite materialized. He was not looking for anyone. He had no plan, no expectation of encountering the ghost that had haunted him all week. And then he saw her. Catherine Reed sat alone on a bench near the fountain, perhaps 50 feet away. Her blonde hair stirred in the October breeze. Her face was turned away, angled down toward something in her hands, and her shoulders were shaking with sobs she was trying to suppress. She was crying. This woman, made of ice and corporate efficiency, was sitting alone in a public park and weeping like her heart was breaking. Before Marcus could decide what to do, Lily's red ball rolled across the plaza and came to rest at Catherine's feet. His daughter chased after it, stopping in front of the crying woman, reaching down for her toy. And then Lily looked up. The sound that escaped his daughter was something between a gasp and a cry. "Mommy?" Catherine's head snapped up. For one eternal moment, they stared at each other, two pairs of identical blue eyes meeting for the first time. The photograph slipped from Catherine's trembling fingers and landed face up on the bricks. Marcus saw it clearly. A wedding photograph. Emily in her white dress, laughing at the camera with champagne in her hand. "I am not your mommy, sweetheart." Catherine's voice cracked as tears spilled down her cheeks. "I am not. I am so sorry. I am not her. But you look exactly like Mommy." Lily's small body was rigid with confusion. "Daddy, come look!" Marcus crossed the distance between them, knelt beside his daughter, one hand on her trembling shoulder. His eyes met Catherine's for the first time at close range. She recognized him immediately. "You are him. You are Marcus Cole. Where did you get that photo?" Catherine seemed unable to speak. The resemblance between Lily and herself was undeniable. Same eyes, same face, same golden hair catching the light. "I am sorry." Catherine stood abruptly. "I cannot do this. I thought I could, but I cannot." She fled across the plaza, leaving the photograph behind. Marcus watched her disappear, his daughter crying against his chest. "Daddy, why did she run away? Why does she look like Mommy?" Marcus picked up the photograph and turned it over. On the back, in neat handwriting, were words that changed everything. "Emily Cole, my sister. Born October 15th, 1988. Died March 22nd, 2020. Sister. A sister who had discovered the truth too late." 3 days later, Marcus stood outside a penthouse apartment in the Pearl District. Grace had given him the address after he explained what he had found. He knocked. The door opened almost immediately. Catherine's eyes were swollen from crying. "I knew you would come. You deserve answers." The apartment was elegant and cold, but one corner stopped Marcus in his tracks. A framed photograph of Emily at her college graduation hung on the wall, and beside it, printouts from an Ancestry DNA website, highlighted passages, circled names. "I grew up in Boston." Catherine's voice was flat. "I was adopted as an infant. My parents loved me. They gave me everything. But I always felt like something was missing. 6 months ago, I did a DNA test. The results came back with a perfect match. An identical twin sister I never knew existed. Her name was Emily Reed. She had been adopted too, through a different agency, to a family in Oregon. We were born in Sacramento. Our birth mother was 16. The agency separated us. They sent us to opposite ends of the country, and neither family was ever told." Catherine's tears began to fall. "I found her name. Then her marriage announcement. Emily Reed became Emily Cole. She had a daughter. She lived in Portland. Her voice broke completely. And then, I found the obituary. She died 5 years before I found her. I spent my whole life feeling incomplete, and by the time I understood why, it was too late. "Why did you fire me?" Marcus asked gently. Catherine laughed bitterly. "Because, when I took this job, I did not know you worked here. I accepted the position to be closer to where Emily had lived, and then I saw your name. The man my sister loved. Every time I saw your face, I saw her. I fired you because I could not bear it. She would have loved you." The words left Marcus's mouth before he could stop them. Emily spent her whole life feeling incomplete. It was you she was missing. Catherine broke down. Marcus stood beside her, just to be present, just to share the grief. When Marcus returned home, Lily was waiting with questions. He sat her down. "The lady at the park is Mommy's sister. Sweetheart. They were twins, but they were separated when they were babies. They never got to meet. So Mommy had a sister, but they never got to play together?" "That is right, baby. That is so sad. Mommy must have been lonely. Can we be nice to her? She must be sad too." That night, Marcus composed a message. "Emily would have wanted to know you. I have videos of her laughing, singing, burning pancakes. I have stories about who she really was. If you want to know your sister, I would like to share them. Lily wants that too." Catherine's response came within minutes. One word: please. They began meeting regularly. Coffee shops, parks, Catherine's apartment. Marcus brought photographs and videos he had not watched in years. He told Catherine about Emily's laugh that ended in snorts, about her terrible cooking, about how she sang in the shower, always off-key, about how she talked to houseplants. Catherine absorbed every detail. "She sounds wonderful. She sounds like someone I would have loved." Slowly, something unexpected happened. Marcus started to see Catherine as her own person. They had the same face. But Emily had been sunshine, loud and bright. Catherine was moonlight, quiet and soft. Where Emily had been chaos, Catherine was calm. Lily started calling her Aunt Kathy. The little girl taught Catherine things Emily had loved: how to make hot chocolate with 7 marshmallows, how to watch the sunset. Catherine learned to braid hair from YouTube tutorials, practicing on dolls before trying her trembling hands on Lily's golden locks. "Is this okay?" Catherine asked. "Mommy's braids were tighter, but yours are pretty too." Marcus watched, his heart doing unexpected things. Catherine was not replacing Emily, but she was carving out her own space. The confession came 3 months later. Lily was asleep. Catherine and Marcus sat on his balcony, watching Portland's lights. "I need to tell you something. And I understand if you hate me after. I came to Portland to know my sister. I stayed because of you and Lily. Somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. I know it is wrong. You loved Emily. I look exactly like her." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I tried to stop it. I could not. At first, I did see her," Marcus said quietly. "Every time I looked at you, I saw Emily. For weeks, I could not separate you." Catherine's expression crumbled. "I should go." Marcus caught her hand. "Let me finish. But now, Catherine, I see you. Emily was chaos. You are calm. Emily was sunshine. You are moonlight. You are not her shadow. You are you. How can this be right? I have her face. You have her face. But you have your own heart, and that heart is what I love. I do not know if this is right or wrong, but I know Emily would want us happy. Do you want to try?" Catherine nodded, tears streaming, and leaned into him as city lights sparkled below. They took things slowly. When they told Lily, she listened carefully. "Would Mommy be okay with that?" "I think so," Catherine said. "I think your Mommy would want your daddy happy. I am not trying to replace her. Mommy said everyone deserves love. I think she would be happy." A year passed. Catherine moved nearby. She offered Marcus his old job back. He declined. having found a startup he loved. They visited Emily's grave together. "Thank you for loving them first," Catherine whispered. "Thank you for giving me a family." 1 year later, the three of them walked through Pioneer Courthouse Square. Same fountain, same bench. Lily ran ahead chasing pigeons. Marcus and Catherine walked hand in hand. "Emily always said she felt incomplete," Marcus said. "Like something was missing. I felt that too. My whole life. Maybe you were looking for each other all along. Maybe this is how you finally found each other. Through us." Catherine smiled. For the first time, no sadness. Only peace. "Come on, slowpokes," Lily shouted. The ice cream truck. They ran to catch up with the little girl who had brought them together. 3 figures moved through afternoon light. A father who learned to love again. A woman who found the family her sister left behind. A child who understood that love does not replace what is lost. It grows alongside it. The ice cream was chocolate. The laughter was bright. And somewhere beyond this world, Emily watched and smiled at the sister she had never known. The ending was not what anyone expected. But then again, the best endings rarely are.